Again, welcome Gloria to the show and welcome to Atlanta.
Thank you very much.
I want to talk to you about, because I've known you a while and I know you have done a variety of films. So before we get to the film, I would like the audience to know that you have been working in film for many years.
Yes.
So please share with us your background and some of the films that you have done, please.
Well, I think that the last film that I showed here in Atlanta was On the Roots of My Heart. That it is a fiction history that I made related with the Independent Party of Color through a family history. But before I showed Ogun Forever Present, the documentary dedicated to Lázaro Rose and the Orisha tradition, and also my footsteps in Baragua that is related with the people who migrate from Barbados, Jamaica, and arrived to Cuba at the beginning of the 20th century. I think that I showed these three films here, and then I remember that the reception was very good.
Yes, I remember that. I may recall too because that's when I met you in those years and was fascinated by your work and continue to follow you. One of the themes in two of your films, Footsteps of
Footsteps in Baragua.
in Baragua,
Sí.
that is one of my favorites because I can relate to the subject, because most of the immigrants that went to Cuba that are documented in the film had this sense of being a migrant, but yet holding on to their home country.
Mm-hmm.
And that was captured so very well in this film. And also the fact that there was so much migration going on to Cuba, even if you spoke English and you had that old colonial experience by the British. So can you talk about the subject itself, the migration, and how important that is to the Caribbean experience?
The migration experience is part of the Caribbean history. People need to migrate because after the slavery system, they need to work and they didn't own the land. So the big migration was, for example, to the Panama Canal. But another important migration was at the beginning of the 20th century to Cuba to work in the sugar industry. And not only West Indian arrived, also many Haitians arrived and people from Aruba, Curacao, and different places. So it's to ignore that history is to me is one part of the Cuban history. So we need to make a tribute to all these immigrants that arrived to Cuba, and they make family and they are part of Cuba. So when we talk about Afro-Cuban history, we not only need to think about the religion or the drums and the dances, it's also the history that we share with the rest of the Caribbean. And the migration is the key to understand what happened.
How different is Footsteps to Baragua is from the one that you did with the Cayman Islands?
The Baragua is related with the world of the sugar mill, and the Cayman Island is more related with the world of the fishermen. It's a history that is very similar.
Yes.
In terms of the economic situation of the people that need to migrate, but the context of the Cayman Island to arrive to Isle of Pine in the 20s, in the 30s, they used to work in the citric harbors, and also they work as a fisherman. So it's totally different. And I mentioned in the last interview that it was the Jackson family that arrived to one part of the Isle of Pine, and they founded Jacksonville. For that reason, we had Jacksonville in the Isle of Pine. Actually, this is not the common name. The common name now is Cocodrilos, but the old Caymanian, they recognize that place like Jacksonville.
That's very interesting, and it's a part of our Caribbean history.
Yes.
That thank God you have done, because very little has been done to document those experiences.
And many people die. Many people pass away, and we are losing, this kind of chapter. But even if we lose these people, we need to remind the people that carry, these family names, these British names, these English names, and they are Cuban. We need to remind their origin. Where do you come from? Where do your relatives come from? And there is a beautiful family bridge between people of Cayman Island, actually, and people of Isle of Pine. They visit their relatives because many of them they were born in Isle of Pine, and they are living now in Cayman Island.
Wow, very interesting. Now we can move to your reason for being in Atlanta and this very serious documentary that deals with a very serious and interesting part of Cuban history. Can you tell us now about the film that you are
See,
working?
this is a project that I start with Aline Hegel. She's a professor from Switzerland that used to teach in Houston, and that's how I get in touch also with the themes more deeply, because she wrote a book that the name is Our Rightful Share, and she went to Cuba, and we started doing some interviews in 2003 that even for me in that moment, honestly, I didn't think to became all this interview in a documentary. But we made many interviews at that time, 2003, and after little by little, I decided that it was important to make a documentary with all this interview. So I went back to Santiago de Cuba. I did more shooting, and I made it totally independent. It was a very hard work, but it was important to narrate for what reason the black people in Cuba, they need their own black political party, and what happened with the party, and then the massacre, what happened, how these issues happen, and also in order that the people can understand for what reason the silence. This is something that is a big question around the three chapters. I don't explain the silence. I only try to give voices to that silence, voices of people that have memories about these issues, or the historians, but also the voices of the members of the Independent Party of Color, how using elements of their own newspaper, Previsión. I took fragments, pieces of this paragraph of the words that they wrote in the newspaper Previsión, and I try and I put in the voice of the actors or the actress that work with me, and in this way people can get in touch with the way that they were thinking, because it was a total silence, and it was important that the independents they talk. Even some of the music, I found the lyrics in the newspaper Previsión, and I use it as part of the music of the film, but it's the voices of the Independent Party of Color. Okay, because the chapter of this history was written by those who were opposed to the Independent Party of Color. That means that we don't have too many elements to make an analysis of the Independent Party of Color. So it was I used the voices of the enemies of the Independent Party of Color, the voices of the historian, and the voices and the images of the documents that I found in the police archive, in the National Archive, in the Archive of Santiago de Cuba, and I am sure that all around Cuba there are many other documents that can talk about this history. But according to my modest resources, I was able to shoot in Havana, in Santa Clara a little bit, and Santiago de Cuba, where the majority of the issues of the massacre happened.
Very good, and sounds very interesting, and I hope that with this piece that you have created, that further research would take, people would follow up and continue with the research of this important
That's
subject.
the idea. I didn't want to say the last word about the thing. I think that people need to explore even what happened after the massacre in 1912. For what reason black people keeping silent? For what reason the official history keeping silent? And even at the present, you could ask any Cuban actually now, and many people, they don't know anything. It's the first time that they hear about this. Last year, because of the 100 years of the massacre, in the official newspaper in Cuba appear, articles, and we made an homage and everything. But it is something that is still take time to pass to the instruction of the people. That means that at school, how are they going to teach this chapter of the Cuban history in the school? This is the process that we are still, trying to present. And I hope that these 3 chapters can help first the teacher, and then that they could teach this history.
Very good. We are going to take a pause and we'll be right back.